The collision Victoria Sterling had exactly 17 minutes to deliver the rare orchid specimens to the 42nd floor of Cross Industries before her boss would fire her for the third time this month. When she wasn't particularly worried about the firing part, Henderson's Garden Supply had a revolving door policy when it came to employees, but she desperately needed this job to fund her botanical research. The elevator in the gleaming Manhattan Tower seemed to take forever, giving Victoria time to admire the pristine specimens in her cart. Each orchid represented months of careful cultivation, and she treated them like precious children. The Phalaenopsis hybrid she'd been nurturing for 8 months was finally ready for its new home in the law firm's executive suite. When the elevator doors opened, Victoria carefully maneuvered her cart into the marble lobby. The space was intimidating with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art installations, but she focused on her mission. Just 17 steps to the reception desk, hand over the delivery confirmation, and she could return to her tiny greenhouse where she belonged. That's when Damian Cross burst through the emergency stairwell doors like a man fleeing a fire. The collision was spectacular. Victoria's cart flew sideways, sending soil, ceramic shards, delicate purple petals across the pristine white marble floor. The sound echoed through the lobby like a gunshot, followed by the heartbreaking tinkle of broken pottery. Victoria dropped to her knees immediately, her hands frantically trying to gather the scattered remains of her precious orchid. The root system was exposed, vulnerable, possibly dying. 8 months of patient care destroyed in 3 seconds. How much? The voice above her was sharp, impatient. A hand appeared in her peripheral vision, already reaching for a wallet. I'll pay for it, whatever it costs. Victoria looked up and found herself staring into the most intense gray eyes she'd ever seen. The man was tall, probably in his early 30s, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and there was something desperate in his expression that had nothing to do with the broken orchid. It's not about money, Victoria said quietly, turning her attention back to the plant. She carefully lifted the main root cluster, examining it for damage. This is a hybrid Phalaenopsis that I've been developing for almost a year. It's one of a kind. The man crouched down beside her, and Victoria caught a hint of expensive cologne mixed with something else, stress, maybe fear. I'm sorry, he said, and she was surprised by the genuine remorse in his voice. I was in a hurry. I wasn't looking where I was going. Victoria glanced at him again. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This wasn't just some careless executive rushing to his next meeting. This was a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I might survive, she said, more to herself than to him. If I can get it back to proper growing conditions quickly enough. My name is Damian Cross. He paused, as if expecting recognition. When Victoria showed none, he continued, This is my building, my company. Victoria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She'd just told the owner of Cross Industries that money couldn't fix his mistake. I'm Victoria Sterling, from Henderson's Garden Supply. I was delivering this to Morrison and Associates. Victoria. He tested her name and something in his voice made her look at him again. I have a proposition for you. The proposal. Victoria carefully placed the orchid remains in a makeshift container and stood up, brushing soil from her jeans. Mr. Cross, I really need to salvage what I can of this plant. If there's a possibility of recovery, every minute counts. Wait, Damian stood as well, towering over her. Please, just hear me out. Something in his tone made her pause. There was a vulnerability there that seemed completely at odds with his powerful presence. I need someone to pose as my fiancée for 2 weeks, he said quickly, as if afraid he'd lose his nerve. It's a business arrangement, nothing inappropriate. Just appearances at a few social events and meetings. Victoria stared at him. You serious? Completely serious? There's a major investor, Richard Blackwood, who's very traditional, old school. He values family stability, and he's made it clear that he prefers to do business with settled men, with wives and families. So get a wife, Victoria said bluntly. Damian's laugh was bitter. It's not that simple. The deal has to close. Within 2 weeks, or I lose everything. Blackwood arrives tomorrow for a series of meetings and social events. He wants to meet my family. Victoria looked around the opulent lobby, then back at Damian, You're telling me that a man who owns all this can't find a woman to pretend to be engaged to him for 2 weeks? The women in my usual social circle would see this as an opportunity for something permanent. I need someone who understands it's purely business. Okay. Someone who won't get the wrong idea. Victoria felt a spark of indignation. Someone who's not good enough for your social circle, you mean? Damian had the grace to look uncomfortable.
Yes.
Not what I meant, isn't it? Victoria picked up her makeshift orchid container. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Cross, but I'm not interested in being anyone's convenient fake girlfriend. She turned to leave, but Damian's next words stopped her cold. I can get you access to the Meridian Research Institute. Victoria froze. The Meridian Research Institute was legendary in botanical circles. Their greenhouse facilities were world-class. Their research groundbreaking. Was every botanist's dream to work there, but they were notoriously selective. She turned back slowly. How? Richard Blackwood sits on their board of directors. He's also the primary donor. One word from him, and you'd have full access to their facilities, their research, their experts. Victoria's mind raced. Access to Meridian could advance her research by years. She could finally complete her work on developing drought-resistant food crops, work that could help feed millions of people in climate-affected regions. Why should I trust you, she asked. Damian pulled out his phone and showed her a contact entry. Richard Blackwood's private number. After this deal closes, I'll personally arrange a meeting between you and the Institute's director. Victoria studied his face, looking for signs of deception. All she saw was exhaustion and desperation. What exactly would I have to do? 30 minutes later, Victoria found herself in Damian's private office on the 58th floor, still. Holding her damaged orchid and trying to process the surreal turn her day had taken, the office was impressive but surprisingly warm, with wood paneling and comfortable leather furniture. First things first, Damian said, gesturing to her orchid. Let's save your plant. Led her to a small kitchenette where he produced a ceramic pot and a bag of high-quality potting soil. You keep gardening supplies in your office? Victoria asked, surprised. I have a small garden at home, he said simply. I find it relaxing. Victoria carefully transplanted the orchid, her hands steady despite her racing heart. It might make it, she said finally. Its root system is stronger than I initially thought. Good. Damian pulled out a thick folder. Now let's discuss the arrangement. The folder contained a detailed dossier. Richard Blackwood is 72 years old, widowed, with 3 children and 8 grandchildren. He's known for his integrity and his belief that a man's character is reflected in his personal relationships. What kind of partnership are we talking about? Victoria asked. Damian's jaw tightened slightly. A partnership that will save Cross Industries from bankruptcy. The honesty surprised her. Your company is failing? Struggling. We've had some setbacks, made some poor investments. Blackwood's partnership would provide the capital and credibility we need to recover. Victoria appreciated his directness. What would I need to do exactly? Attend 3 dinners, 2 business lunches, and 1 charity gala. Be charming, supportive, believable. We'll need to create a convincing backstory. And after 2 weeks, we have a very public, very amicable breakup. Oh. You keep the engagement ring as compensation, plus $50,000. Plus I arrange your meeting with Meridian. Victoria stared at the folder. $50,000 would fund her research for years. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite name, that made her hesitate. Why me? She asked finally. Damian was quiet for a long moment. Because when I broke your orchid, you didn't demand money. You mourned something you'd created, something beautiful that couldn't be replaced. That kind of authenticity can't be hired. Victoria felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with business arrangements. I need to think about it, of course. Damian stood and walked to his desk, returning with a business card. My private number. Call me when you've decided. As Victoria left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about Damian Cross would be strictly business. In the elevator, she made her decision and dialed his number. Mr. Cross? It's Victoria. I'll do it. Playing the part Victoria arrived at Damian's penthouse the next evening wearing her best dress and carrying a small overnight bag. She'd spent the entire day second-guessing her decision. But the memory of his desperate honesty and the promise of Meridian kept her moving forward. The penthouse was everything she'd expected, and nothing like she'd imagined. Yes, it was luxurious with floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, but it also felt lived in. Books were scattered on the coffee table, a half-finished crossword. Puzzle lay abandoned on the kitchen counter, and she could smell something delicious cooking in the oven. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. Damian looked up from where he was setting the dining table. He'd changed from his business suit into dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made his eyes look almost silver. "I find it relaxing. Plus, if we're going to convince Blackwood that we're a real couple, you should probably know that I make a decent pasta." Over dinner, they crafted their story. They'd met 6 months ago when Victoria was delivering plants to his office building. He'd been immediately charmed by her passion for her work, and she'd been drawn to his unexpected gentleness with her plants. They'd been dating quietly, keeping their relationship private due to his public profile. "What's your favorite thing?" "About me?" Victoria asked, reading from the list of potential questions Damian had prepared. "Your laugh," he said immediately, then seemed surprised by his own answer. "I mean, we should say your laugh. It's distinctive." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Distinctive good or distinctive bad?" "Good," he said quietly. "Definitely good." The first test came the next morning at breakfast with Richard Blackwood at the Four Seasons. Victoria wore a simple but elegant navy dress that Damian had somehow procured overnight, along with a stunning engagement ring that caught the light beautifully. Blackwood was exactly as Victoria had imagined, distinguished, sharp-eyed, but with a warmth that put her at ease. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, her family, her dreams for the future. Victoria found herself speaking passionately about her research, her hopes of developing crops that could thrive in harsh conditions and feed the world's growing population. "Remarkable," Blackwood said, his eyes twinkling. "Damian, you found yourself a woman with both beauty and purpose. That's rare." Damian's hand found hers across the table. "She's extraordinary," he said, and something in his voice made Victoria's heart skip. The charity gala that evening was a different challenge entirely. Victoria had never been to such an event. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, and conversations about art acquisitions and yacht purchases. She felt out of place until Damian appeared at her side with 2 glasses of champagne. "You look beautiful," he said, and she could tell he meant it. The emerald green gown he'd chosen for her fit perfectly, making her feel like someone else entirely. "I don't belong here," she whispered as they watched couples dancing on the marble floor. "Neither do I, really," Damian confessed. "I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My father was a mechanic. My mother taught elementary school." All this, he gestured around the opulent ballroom. "It's still pretend to me sometimes." Victoria looked at him with new understanding. "Is that why you garden? Do you remember who you are?" "Maybe," he said softly. "Would you like to dance?" On the dance floor, with Damian's arms around her and his hand warm against her back, Victoria felt the lines between pretend and real beginning to blur. He was a good dancer, leading her confidently through the steps, and she found herself relaxing into his embrace. "You're a natural at this," he murmured against her ear. "At dancing, at being yourself? Blackwood is completely charmed. Half the room is watching us, wondering who the mystery woman is who captured Damian Cross's heart." Victoria pulled back to look at him. "And what would you tell them?" "That she's the most genuine person I've ever met. That she cares more about a dying plant than most people care about anything. That she's brilliant and passionate and—" He stopped, his gray eyes intense. "That she's making this feel real." The admission hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Victoria felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Amen." She started, but he spun her away and back into his arms, the moment breaking. "Just 2 more days," he said, but neither of them sounded convinced that it would be enough. Later that night, as Victoria lay in the guest bedroom of Damian's penthouse, she stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The engagement ring caught the moonlight streaming through the windows, and she found herself imagining what it would be like if this were real. In the morning, she found Damian in his kitchen, making coffee and looking rumpled and domestic in a way that made her heart ache. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing her a mug. Like a baby, she Lead, accepting the coffee gratefully. Blackwood wants to take us to lunch today. It's just the three of us. He says he has something important to discuss. Victoria nodded, ignoring the flutter of nerves in her stomach. I think, Damian said, his eyes meeting. Hers over his coffee mug. He's about to make me an offer I can't refuse. What neither of them expected was that the offer would come with strings attached that would change everything. Real Feelings, the lunch meeting with Richard Blackwood, took place at an intimate restaurant overlooking Central Park. Victoria could sense Damian's tension as they were seated, his leg bouncing slightly under the Tabbola, nervous habit she'd noticed over the past few days. Damian, Victoria, Blackwood began, after they'd ordered, I'll be direct. I'm impressed with your company's potential, and I'm prepared to make a significant investment. Victoria felt Damian's hand tighten on hers. This was at the moment everything had been building toward. However, Blackwood continued. I have one condition. The word hung in the air like a sword. Victoria's stomach dropped. I want you both to come work for me at Meridian. It's not just an investment in Cross Industries, but a complete merger. Damian, you'd head up our new technology division. Victoria, you'd lead our botanical research team. Victoria's breath caught. It was everything she'd dreamed of and nothing she'd expected. The catch, Blackwood smiled knowingly, is that I want my senior team to be stable, committed individuals. I'm offering you both positions, but only if you're truly committed to each other. I've seen too many brilliant minds destroyed by personal instability. Victoria's mind raced. Blackwood was offering her the opportunity of a lifetime, but only if she maintained the lie, only if she pretended to be engaged to Damian indefinitely. We'd need some time to discuss this, Damian said carefully. Of course, I'll need an answer by tomorrow evening. I'm hosting a small dinner party at my home just. Family and close friends. I'd like you both to attend, and we can finalize the details then. The walk back to Damian's penthouse was silent, both of them lost in thought. It wasn't until they were in the elevator that Victoria finally spoke. We can't do this, she said quietly. Which part? Damian asked, though his voice suggested. He already knew. Any of it. All of it. We can't build our careers on a lie, Damian. What happens when Blackwood finds out we're not really engaged? What happens when we eventually break up? Damian was quiet for a long moment. Maybe we don't have to. Victoria's heart stopped. What? Maybe we don't have to break up. Maybe we make it real. The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. You're talking about marriage? Victoria whispered. I'm talking about us. It's about what's been happening between us these past few days. You can't tell me you haven't felt it too. Victoria stepped out of the elevator, her mind spinning. Damian, this is crazy. We barely know each other. I know that you talk to your plants when you think no one is listening, he said, following her. I know that you put honey in your coffee and that you're afraid of butterflies, but you won't admit it. I know that you light up when you talk about your research and that you have a scar on your left hand from a gardening accident when you were 12. Victoria stared at him. How do you know about the scar? Because I've been watching you. Really watching you. And I know that when you laugh, freely laugh, your whole face changes. I know that last night when we were dancing, you felt the same thing I did? Which was what? Victoria asked, though she was afraid of the answer. That this doesn't feel like pretending anymore. Victoria turned away, walking to the large windows overlooking the city. Damian, you're asking me to marry you for a job. That's not romance. That's a business transaction, is it? He moved behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Because it doesn't feel like business to me. It feels like I'm falling in love with you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Victoria closed her eyes, fighting. The tears that threatened to fall. You don't love me, she whispered. You love the idea of me. It's a convenient solution I represent. Then why does the thought of you walking away tomorrow make me feel like I can't breathe? Damian's voice was raw, honest. Why do I find myself making excuses to touch your hand? Why do I lie awake at night wondering what it would be like to wake up next to you every morning? Victoria turned to face him, and she could see the truth in his eyes. He meant every word. 'Cause you're lonely, she said gently. Because you've been carrying the weight of your company and your responsibilities alone for so long that any kindness feels like love. Don't tell me what I feel, Damian said, his voice fierce. I've never felt this way about anyone, Victoria, ever. How can you be sure? Because I've never wanted to give up everything for someone before. Because I've never met someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Victoria felt her resolve cracking. And what if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it falls? Apart, we'd lose everything. The jobs, the opportunity, each other. Then we'll have tried, Damian said simply. Isn't that better than always wondering what if? Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. The powerful CEO was gone, replaced by a man who was laying his heart bare, taking the biggest risk of his life. I'm scared, she admitted. Am I? Damian said. But I'm more scared of letting you go. Victoria made her decision. She stepped forward and kissed him, pouring all her confusion and hope and fear into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Okay, she whispered, let's try. But even as Damian wrapped his arms around her, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to step off a cliff together, with no idea if they'd learn to fly or simply fall. True love. The next morning, Victoria woke up in Damian's arms, sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows. For a moment, she let herself enjoy the warmth of his embrace, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he'd unconsciously pulled her closer during the night. Then reality hit. Damian, she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. We need to talk. He opened those gray eyes, instantly alert. Second thoughts? Not about us, she said quickly, but Blackwood, about the lie we're living. Sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. What do you mean? I mean that if we're going to do this, if we're going to try to make this real, then we need to start with honesty. All of it. Victoria, if we tell Blackwood the truth now, we lose everything. The investment, the jobs, Meridian, do we? Victoria interrupted. Or do we lose the opportunity to build something real on a foundation of lies? Damian was quiet for a long moment. You want to tell him? I want to tell him that we started as a business arrangement, yes, but also that somewhere along the way, it became real. That we're choosing each other now, not because of what we can gain, but because of what we found. We'll never invest. In us? Maybe not. But at least we'll know that whatever happens next, we're building it on truth. Damian looked at her, and she could see the war going on behind his eyes. You're asking me to risk everything? I'm asking you to choose me over everything else. It's the same way I'm choosing you. The dinner party at Blackwood's estate that evening was elegant and intimate. Victoria wore the emerald dress again, but this time it felt different, like armor. Rather than costume, she and Damian had spent the day preparing, not their story, but their truth. As they sat around Blackwood's dining table with his family and closest friends, Victoria felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. So, Blackwood said as dessert was served, have you two made your decision? Damian reached for Victoria's hand, squeezing gently. We have. But first, there's something we need to tell you. Our engagement, Victoria began, her voice steady, despite her racing heart, started. As a business arrangement, the table fell silent. Blackwood's expression was unreadable. Damian needed someone to pose as his fiancée to convince you to invest in his company, Victoria continued. I needed access to botanical resources for my research. It was meant to be temporary, purely professional. I see, Blackwood said slowly. And now? Now, Damian said, his voice strong and sure. It's the most real thing in my life. I love this woman, not because of what she can do for my career, but because of who she is. Because she challenges me to be better, to be honest, to be the man I want to be. I love him, Victoria added, not because of his connections or his resources, but because he sees the world the way I do. Because he cares about growing things, nurturing them, making them stronger. Blackwood studied them for a long moment. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft clink of silverware and the distant sound of city traffic. Finally, he smiled. You know, he said, I've been married for 47 years. I've lost my dear wife 3 years ago. And if there's one thing I learned in all that time, it's that the best relationships are the ones that start with mutual respect and grow into something deeper. Victoria felt her heart pounding. I suspected, Blackwood continued, from the beginning that something wasn't quite traditional about your courtship. But watching you two together, seeing how you look at each other, how you support each other, that's not something you can fake. So you're not withdrawing your offer? Damian asked carefully. On the contrary, I'm more convinced than ever that you're both exactly what Meridian needs. People with integrity, with the courage to tell the truth, even when it might cost them everything. 3 months later, Victoria stood in her new laboratory at the Meridian Research Institute, surrounded by the most advanced botanical equipment she'd ever dreamed of working with. Her drought-resistant crop research was progressing beyond her wildest hopes. Dr. Sterling. Her research assistant poked his head through the door. There's someone here to see you. Victoria looked up to find Damian standing in the doorway, holding a small potted plant. Is that? She began. The orchid, he confirmed, stepping into the lab, fully recovered. I thought you might want to see it. Victoria took the pot. From him, marveling at the healthy green leaves and the beginnings of a flower spike, it's beautiful. Even more beautiful than before. Like us, Damian said softly. Victoria looked up at him, this man who'd collided with her life so spectacularly, and changed everything. Are you getting sentimental on me, Cross? Maybe a little, he admitted. I was thinking about something. What's that? Our wedding is in 2 weeks. We're going to be surrounded by family and friends, making promises to each other in front of everyone we love. And I realized that I already made you a promise the day I ran into you when I said I'd get you access to Meridian. I kept that promise. Victoria set the orchid down carefully. Did. So now I want to make you a new promise, Damian said, stepping closer. I promise to love you not because it's convenient or profitable or logical, but because you're you, because you talk to plants and put honey in your coffee and make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Damian, ... I promise to support your dreams even when they're bigger than mine, to be proud of your successes even when they overshadow my own, to be your partner in everything, not just on paper. And I promise, Victoria said, reaching up to cup his face, to love you not because of what you can give me, but because of who you are when you think no one is watching. Because you're gentle with broken things, and you never give up on what matters. They kissed then, surrounded by the green growing things that had brought them together. And Victoria knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them. The same way they'd faced everything else together, with honesty and courage and love. 2 weeks later, at their wedding reception, Blackwood raised a toast to Damian and Victoria, who taught an old man that the best business deals are the ones that bring people together rather than drive them apart. As Victoria danced with her husband under the stars, she thought about the orchid that had started it all. Sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the most unexpected collisions. Sometimes what looked like an ending was really just the beginning. The end.